these movies are just perfect, and I love all of them, and it's super impossible to rank. So why am I doing it? Because I just love Tarantino, that's why. Hi, my name is Jake, and I am a bookish drummer. So for this video, I will be discussing a different topic than what I would normally do on my channel. For this video, I will be ranking every Quentin Tarantino movie. Now, like I said, this is a little different for me. I normally talk about books. I love to talk about Stephen King. But Quentin Tarantino is easily my favorite movie director of all time. Hands down, no questions. I love all of his movies. And honestly, this was one of, if not the hardest lists I've ever had to make because, like I said, Tarantino is easily my favorite movie director. I love all of his movies, and really the only two movies that were the easiest to rank were number 1 and number 2. After that, just like number 9 and number 3, like they're all 5-star movies. So like this is going to be really difficult for me to rank, and there's probably going to be some unpopular opinions, which if you've seen my Stephen King videos, you know that I'm all about unpopular opinions. So, you know what, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Let's go ahead and kick off the list with some honorable mentions. Now, the first one I'm going to mention is Four Rooms, which this is an anthology movie, and it stars Tim Roth as like this weird bellhop. And it's called Four Rooms because he has 4 encounters, and each one of those sections of the movie is directed by a different director, including Tarantino in the very last section. I just wanted to include it on the list because probably not a lot of people have seen this or heard of it. I've actually only ever seen it once. I remember liking it, but I don't really remember it at all. But I at least wanted to mention it here. So that's an honorable mention. The other honorable mention is True Romance, which Tarantino wrote but did not direct. So when I watched this movie, and I've only seen this movie once, I loved the dialogue. The dialogue felt like typical Tarantino, but the movie itself didn't exactly feel like a Tarantino movie. Even though it was really good, I remember enjoying it, but it just didn't have the same flair that a Tarantino movie would. But of course, I wanted to include it on my honorable mention. And now onto the actual list. Coming in at number 9, I really hate putting it at the bottom because even though it is at the bottom, I hate calling it his worst movie because I love all of his movies, but something has to come in at the bottom, right? And for me, that would be Jackie Brown. Like I said before, and I'll probably say a lot in this video, I love all of his movies. Like, they're all 5-star movies for me. So just because it's at the bottom doesn't mean I hate this movie by any means. The main reason why it's at the bottom is because it's the Tarantino movie that I've seen the least amount of times. Like, I've seen most Tarantino films probably at least 10 times, if not way more. But this one I've only seen a handful of times, like maybe 3 or 4, and I really need to rewatch it soon because I actually haven't watched this in quite a long time, and obviously I loved it whenever I watched it, and of course the cast is amazing. You got Pam Grier, Robert De Niro, and of course it's got Tarantino all over it. But like I said, the main reason why it comes in at the bottom is because it's the Tarantino movie that I've seen the least amount of times, which I feel like if I go back and rewatch this movie a couple times, it might rise up on the list. Because I know for a lot of people, it's his most underrated one, which makes sense because this came out right after Quentin Tarantino blew up with Pulp Fiction in 1994. This one came out just after that in 1997. It didn't do quite as well in the box office, but it's still really good nonetheless. And I think it just gets overlooked by a lot of Tarantino fans. And probably me as well, because I've only seen it a few times, and it comes in at the bottom of my list. But nonetheless, it's still a great movie. I just hate that, something has to come in at the bottom. So for me, number 9 is Jackie Brown. Coming in at number 8, this is where I might start to make some people mad because I know a lot of people love this movie. I do too, obviously. I said before, I love all his movies. But if I had to pick one that would be his most overrated, it would probably be this one. Let's just go ahead and talk about it. Number 8 is Reservoir Dogs. And of course, like I said with Jackie Brown, I love this movie. It's a 5-star movie. It's got Tarantino-isms all over it with the nonlinear timelines and the really cool and quirky dialogue and character banter. And the storyline is very simple yet very effective. I love this movie. But honestly, it's one of the Tarantino movies that I seek out the least amount of times. Like, I've still seen this movie plenty of times, don't get me wrong. But if we're talking about, like, upper echelon Tarantino, I don't watch this movie as much as I do some of my all-time favorite Tarantino movies. But nonetheless, it's still a fantastic movie. And obviously, it has one of the most iconic movie scenes of all time, and it really makes you think about the song Stuck in the Middle with You in a very different light. Every time I hear that song, I'm like, oh yeah, Reservoir Dogs. So like I said, even though I love this movie, I do feel like it is probably his most overrated. I know a lot of people cite this as his best, even though it is his debut. Like, some people say it's his best movie, and a lot of people would put it in their top 3 or whatever. For me, it's not that I don't love this movie. It's just that the rest of his movies are just better for me. And of course, this is all subjective. This is not an objective list by any means. But for me, Reservoir Dogs comes in at number 8 on the list. Coming in at number 7 on the list, we have a movie that would probably be last place for a lot of people making this type of list. But for me, I do like it. And I think it does help that I saw this movie in theaters when I was very young and impressionable, and I really enjoyed it. And that would, of course, be Death Proof, which this came out in 2007. So when I went to see it in theaters, it was like the Grindhouse double feature, right? With Planet Terror, directed by Robert Rodriguez, and then Death Proof, directed by Tarantino. And at this point, he had only directed, I think, 4 movies, and I loved all of them. So I was fucking excited to see this movie. And it was really good, even though, it was very slow-paced, which, makes sense because with what Tarantino was trying to do with the movie, he was trying to reckon back to, like, old 70s Grindhouse movies, right, that were kind of slow, right, but then had these big action scenes, and like this has a lot of cool car stunts and action scenes in it. But and I do love that stuff. But really what makes this movie for me is the dialogue and the character dynamics, and especially the second half of this movie, where you get just the female characters coming to life, and just the banter and just everything. Oh, and of course, how could I forget Kurt Russell, one of the best villains of any movie, just like a crazy, maniacal, killing stunt driver dude. Oh man, Kurt Russell nailed his performance, and man, I love this movie. I wish I could put it higher on the list, but there are, 6 more movies that I love even more than this movie. I really want to go back and rewatch this movie now. But yeah, I know a lot of people cite this as his worst movie, but I do disagree in that I think it's a fucking great movie. I love it. I can understand the criticisms, but for me, it comes in at number 7 on the list. And this is the part of the list where it's just like impossible to rank, because at any time, like the number 6 spot could jump up to number 3 or vice versa. Like, these movies are just perfect, and I love all of them, and it's super impossible to rank. So, why am I doing it? Because I just love Tarantino, that's why. But for number 6, I'm just going to have to go with Django Unchained. And again, I saw this movie when it came out in theaters. I saw it twice. I saw it once with my dad, who was also a huge Tarantino fan, and then I saw it with a group of friends. Oh man, seeing a Tarantino film in theaters is the best. It's one of the best movie-going experiences I've ever had, just going to see his films. Tarantino does such a good job with revenge tales, and of course we'll get to that later on in the video, but man, Jamie Foxx's performance in here, just incredible. You've also got Leonardo DiCaprio playing such an interesting villain. You've got Samuel L. Jackson in a very interesting role. And then you've got, what's his name? Christoph Waltz, just coming off his performance in Inglourious Basterds, doing this role. Oh man, this movie is just so good, so well paced, even though, you know, probably a lot of people would criticize Tarantino for making too long of films, but for me, sometimes I wish his films were longer just because they're so good. It's like 2.5 hours, and it just flies by every time I watch it. It's so good. Especially with this one, the cinematography is really good. The costumes, just everything about this movie. The score, it's so good. You're praising it so much. Why is it number 6? Well, Tarantino just has some badass movies. And just, God, this is number 6. I'm just not realizing this. How is this number 6? I guess he's just got 5 more movies that are better. But yeah, I love this movie, and let's just move on. This is number 6, Django Unchained. And speaking of Christoph Waltz in Inglourious Basterds, number 5 is Inglourious Basterds. And this was, like I said, my dad was like a huge Tarantino fan as well. This would be his number 1 spot. I'm pretty sure he loved this movie and would rewatch it a ton. I'm pretty sure the copy in this is all scratched up from it. And honestly, I can't believe I'm only putting it at number 5 because I fucking love this movie. And like I said, the performances are outstanding. You've got Christoph Waltz, who just steals the show, but you've also got Brad Pitt and just a ton of other people that are just thrown into this movie. Just so many great performances. And of course, you know, I'm not a huge fan of World War II movies. I find them to be very depressing because they're just oftentimes portrayed so realistically. But to have a movie like this where Tarantino kind of like flips the script and makes it very entertaining, and of course the ending is just outrageously hilarious. Oh man, this movie just fucking is so good. So good. Everything about this movie is fantastic. And of course, it pains me to only have it at number 5. But of course, if I filmed this like 2 weeks from now, this might be number 3 for all I know. But for right now, I'm going to have to go with Inglourious Basterds for number 5. This pick might be unpopular. I think most people would put it on the lower end of their ranking for Tarantino. But for me, like with all these movies, I absolutely love it. And that would, of course, be The Hateful Eight. And like with the past couple of movies I talked about, just seeing this movie in theaters was just such an experience. I loved it. That opening shot of the blizzard and the carriage walking through just very slowly. Oh man, it's so good. Mwah. So good. And of course, this probably, I don't know if I want to say that, but just one of the best casts in all of Tarantino's movies. You've got so many great people that were in a lot of his other movies previously. But of course, you got Samuel L. Jackson, you got Kurt Russell, you got Tim Roth, you've got Jennifer Jason Leigh, Michael Madsen, Bruce Dern, like just an all-star cast. And of course, it's called The Hateful Eight. And it's got a very simple premise. You know, a lot of Tarantino movies before this, had kind of like this huge epic scale, like World War II or, like the Civil War, right? But this one is very enclosed, takes place mostly inside a cabin during a blizzard. And so Tarantino, of course, had to rely on his excellent dialogue. And his dialogue is always superb in his movies, but in this one, it's especially good. This movie is hilarious and it's so good. So, yeah, that's number 4. And for a long time, this probably was my second or third favorite. But of course, thinking about it now, it's a little lower. But yeah, any other day, it could be different. And I mean, that's with a lot of these movies, right? Like, I really thought about, like, do I like Inglourious Bastards or Hateful Eight more? I don't know. But at the end of the day, Hateful Eight, oh man, it's too hard. It's too impossible. But for now, Hateful Eight is number 4 on the list. This one also might surprise some people, and it surprised me, and I'm gonna probably have to rethink this in like a few years' time because this might just be recency bias. I don't know. But for now, I'm gonna go with number 3 as Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Now, the first time I saw it, I, of course loved it, but I didn't think like, oh, this is like a new all-time favorite Tarantino movie. But I actually saw this movie 3 times in theaters. Like, I paid money to go see it 3 times. That's how much I loved it. And it just got better. It's one of those rare movies where just every time you see it, it gets better and better and better. And this is his newest one. It came out in 2019, and I've probably already seen it like 10 times, at least. And it's so good. And like I said, it gets better and better every time. And of course, it's one of those slow burn movies and slice of life kind of deal where not a lot actually happens, and Tarantino really has to rely on his cinematography and his dialogue and his very subtle storytelling. And then, of course, it all coalesces into this huge, just rompous, hilarious, brutal ending that I still remember the first time I saw it. I just died laughing and was just the greatest thing I had ever seen. Oh man, the ending to this movie is just one of the best endings to any movie. Oh, and of course, all-star cast, Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie. just so many great performances. And again, it's probably too long of a movie, but at times when I watch this movie, I wish it was longer just to get more interactions with these characters. And I even love this movie so much that, I am a booktuber after all. I did go out and buy, the novelization. It first came out in paperback, which I think was Tarantino's decision. And I read it and I really liked it. And now I have the special edition. It was really fun to like get all of the like inside of the characters' minds, like their thoughts. Because in the movie you can only do so much. But again, I love this movie. Maybe in a few years' time, it'll wane down. Like some of my other favorite Tarantino movies will replace it. Like Inglourious Bastards might shoot up to number 3, but for right now, I'm definitely gonna have to go with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood at number 3 on the list. Now, for the top 2 spots, these 2 Quentin Tarantino movies have basically always been my 2 favorite by him, even so much as these are just 2 movies that I would easily put in my top 10, and the number 1 spot is my all-time favorite movie. If you've seen my channel, I've probably mentioned it a few times on my channel, so you probably already know what it is. But let's go ahead and get down to it. My second favorite Quentin Tarantino movie of all time is Kill Bill. And Quentin Tarantino himself cites, both of these movies as being one, even though it comes out in 2 volumes. I always count it as one movie just because it does tell one long story. I know some people, when they do this type of ranking video, they'll separate them. Like they'll think volume 1 is better, it's at the top of their list, and volume 2 is near the bottom. For me, whenever I watch these movies, I try to watch them back to back anyway, so I always just count them as one long thing anyway. But either way, I love both of them. I just love the whole thing. It's probably the best revenge tale of all time for me. Uma Thurman just absolutely kicks ass in this movie. I love it. It's so original. And of course, the violence is over the top. And of course, when I first saw it, I was fairly young and it was just amazing. Oh man, just everything in this movie is so good. Cinematography, the score, probably the best musical score of any movie, best soundtrack. Just, it's so good. And of course, the performances and the action and the dialogue, everything about this movie works for me. So yes, even though this is a top 10 movie for me of all time, I wouldn't change anything about it. I just love everything about this movie. There is still one more Tarantino movie that I love even better. And of course, not only my favorite Quentin Tarantino movie of all time, just absolutely my favorite movie of all movies of all time. And that would be Pulp Fiction. Out of all the Tarantino films, I have seen this one the most amount of times. I can watch this movie in any kind of mood that I'm in. If I'm sad, it'll pick me up. If I'm happy, I'll stay happy. If I want like a good laugh, there's some laugh out loud moments in here. If I just want to chill out and put a movie on, I can do that. I've seen this movie countless times and I love it. It's also one of those rare movies where, like, even though I've seen it so many times, I can pick up on like little things here and there that I never came across the, dozens of other times that I've seen it. And it's so good, so iconic. This movie changed movie culture for the better, in my opinion. Just everything about this movie is perfect. It's one of those flawless movies I can watch over and over again. And of course, the performances, Uma Thurman right there, Bruce Willis, John Travolta, Samuel L. Jackson, Tim Roth, just everyone in this movie did a fantastic job. And it's easily my favorite Quentin Tarantino movie. And like I said, easily my favorite movie of all time. I love it. I know some people might think it's overrated. I think it deserves all the hype it gets and has gotten. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. It's a perfect movie. I love it. It's my favorite Tarantino movie, and it's also my favorite movie of all time. So Pulp Fiction comes in at number 1 on the list. All right, so that is my ranking for all of Quentin Tarantino's movies. What did you guys think of my list? Do you agree with me in that Pulp Fiction is his best movie? Or do you disagree with me and think that it's overrated? Do you think maybe Inglourious Basterds is your favorite? Or do you think I'm really harsh on Jackie Brown, even though I do love it? Just put down your favorite Quentin Tarantino movie, and if you've seen all of them, just give me your ranking for all of them. I'd love to chat with you about it in the comments below. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my YouTube channel in the Book Astronomer Discord. And if you'd like to further support me financially, go check out my Patreon page and see what that's all about. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching and have a terrific day. So for this video, I will be talking about something a little different than what I normally do on the channel. For this video, I'm going to be ranking every Quentin Tarantino movie. Now, of course, Quentin Tarantino is my all-time favorite. Damn it! I feel naked without my beard. Out of all of the Tarantino movies that I've seen, well, that's a stupid way to phrase it. I've seen all of them.